Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 226 of the podcast. I hope you had a great Easter. If you're listening to this when it comes out, we've got a great guest for you today. His name's James Sabin. James leads his own podcast, actually, Youth Ministry Soul Keeper podcast. But we're going to talk all about student ministry in a pandemic and how he has implemented a system to retain first-time guest students. So if you lead in kids ministry or student ministry or family ministry overall, you're going to love hearing about that part of it, even if you don't lead in student ministry. But beyond that, we talk about what did his student ministry look like when when COVID-19 hit and they went online, and then when they started gathering again, what does it look like today? So we kind of go through all of that. And I didn't even know before we did the interview that he had purchased the new family retention plan resource from Ministry Boost and implemented that this January and has seen some great results from it. So when he mentioned that, I dug in. I wanted to ask more, figure out how he made it work. Our hope when we created that resource is that we could give you 80% of a finished product in terms of a plan to retain new guests, whether that's kids, students, families overall, your entire church, whatever. And so I loved hearing from him how he implemented it. It's still going to take some work, though. 80% doesn't mean you just put a couple hours in and implement this thing. A great, comprehensive plan to retain guests is not simple. It needs to feel simple when it's done, but it's not simple to put together. And so it might take you 10, 20 hours, to do your 20% and apply it. But you can get the new family retention plan, do the same thing James did. You can hear about what he did to implement that. And you can get the new family retention plan for 50% off just for a limited time here that we're making available for folks who are thinking about Easter. How do I retain and see more of the guests that we saw at Easter, whether they watched online or attended in person? How do we see them come back and stick and stay? So you can get 50% off. Just go to ministryboost.org where you can get that. Now we're also in the last week of the push for Volunteer Boost, the 28-day challenge to recruit more volunteers. That starts, if you're listening to this, on Monday. So you got to sign up by Sunday, April 11th. It's just $37 for your whole staff. Now, a lot of people take it by themselves, but if you can, I would encourage you to get everybody who leads volunteers on board to do this together. And then you work together as you take this challenge and try to recruit more volunteers. Last week, you got to hear Crystal's story about how she implemented it. And we can't wait to help more leaders recruit more volunteers in this second round of Volunteer Boost. You can check that out at ministryboost.org as well. As always, you can get the links and notes at nickblevins.com/episode 226. But let's listen to James Sabin talk about his experience leading student ministry in a pandemic. Well, today we have James Sabin on the podcast. Welcome, James.
Hey, how you doing, Nick?
Doing well. Tell us about yourself, your role, your church, as we get to talk some student ministry here.
Yeah, sure. I'm the youth and family pastor at Kingdom of Community Church. We're in Morgan, right outside Morgantown, West Virginia, right over the bridge from WV University. So we're kind of like, we're a church right there on campus, and have actually a pretty high college presence as well as students. But it's just it's a really good community and a great place to serve, very diverse. And I've been here for 10 years now.
That's awesome. And by the way, we didn't talk about this. So one thing we are going to talk about is student ministry and just your experience through pre-pandemic, through the pandemic,
Sure.
All that. But you just mentioned college students, a pretty good portion of the attendance. I'm just curious, your church was about 1,200 pre-pandemic. How many college students would that be?
That's a great question. We're probably around, I would say we probably are close to, maybe 80 college students or more to 100, something like in that zone. Yeah, we're probably living there.
I was wondering because, it'd be very different if it was like 300. You know what I mean? It just changes things with like what you can do. And probably got a lot of great volunteers, but then they're seasonal.
Yes,
college students aren't exactly giving the most either. So there are churches, that are in that camp where it's like just their location. It's like, wow, they're a quarter or a third of college students, which is cool. But we're mostly going to talk student ministry. You and I were talking before we recorded, just kind of getting a sense of what that journey's been like for you through COVID and into now and all that. But let's talk about, kind of give the backstory a little bit. So the church is about 23, 24 years old as a plant. It was about 250 in size when you went there.
Mhm.
10 years ago or so.
Yeah, almost.
And then,
Yep.
like we
Almost. Yep.
said, 1,200 pre-pandemic. Tell us about the student ministry kind of before COVID-19 hit.
Okay, yeah. So, before, I mean, we were a growing student ministry. Like I said, when I got here, about almost, 250, 300 in attendance. Pretty much just had a youth ministry of one or two, which is why why Kevin asked me to come and be the youth and family pastor here. But they did have a thriving FCA ministry. So they were kind of housing an FCA ministry that Pastor Kevin was leading, and that was thriving and that was doing great. But of course, he couldn't do that and a youth ministry. And his goal was always to try and connect the two, which we have done. We call it Athletes Edge now, and it's kind of like a hybrid of FCA, and yet we're still very close supporters of FCA at the same time. It's kind of cool. We have these cool little networks with some of the parachurch ministries in our community that we just have healthy relationships, and we've been able to partner together and just minister to the community. But that's kind of, again, that's an aside. But yeah, but that was happening. And then, pre-pandemic, we got to a place where, we had a great team of leaders, of course, and because you can't pull it off without your leaders, and a great team of leaders. And we had about, I'm going to say, like I said, close to around 120 active youth. And at that time, we're probably averaging in the 60s between middle school and high school, showing up 60 and 70 zone on a Sunday night. And that's kind of where we were pre-pandemic.
And they were meeting separately, like at the same time, different
Yep.
locations, which we totally still do and did begin as our church too, Sunday nights. But describe that for us.
Yeah, so when parents drop them off, we have a middle school check-in area that's kind of like in our lobby section, and then we have a high school check-in area that's at our chapel, and both kind of work perfectly with the size of our two groups. Not ideal, but it works, of course, and they, like I said, we both have separate experiences at the same time for both, and then it pretty much goes games. At the time, middle school wasn't doing worship, and believe it or not, our high school wasn't doing much worship, and we would do, of course, a message, and then we'd break out into small groups, and that's kind of was the format. And then at 7:30, so from 6 to 7:30, at 7:30, our small group leaders would release the kids to go home.
Cool. Now let's talk about some of the things you changed, in the midst of COVID-19, other than obvious things like safety protocols and things like that. But you did some other changes with combining them, some things online. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So our first move, because right away, of course, you couldn't meet, right? So our first move was to go online. We created this late night live experience, kind of this talk show host experience, which I don't know if you know, a good friend of mine, Frank Gill, he kind of spearheaded that, and I just copied him. He had done that for some years, and I was just like, I'm just gonna copy that because that looks good. So anyway, this gave us a good excuse to try that, and it did. It went great. I mean, people were kind of locked in their homes, and it really became this family experience. Where I had, we would do this late night live. We set up a small little studio, kind of, the whole late night live look and set, and we'd have student guests and leaders, and we'd play games online. I'd give a small message, and of course there were other churches doing the same thing. This wasn't kind of a unique experience only to us. We were just kind of following the lead of some others who were doing some great work there, and really we just had great feedback. Parents loved it. Like we had older siblings, younger siblings, parents all sitting together around a computer or around like their Apple TVs or whatever, and watching this late night live youth ministry experience. And it was really cool. We'd have giveaways, we'd have call-ins, it was really cool. It kind of felt like, okay, we're holding together and we're able to minister to our students and their families, like for real at the same time. And you had parents saying, thanks so much for doing this. Like I think parents for the first time got a real kind of peek in to what we were doing and what was happening in youth ministry. And there was a greater appreciation that we got to experience from them that was really cool. And that was kind of the first shift we made. And then, of course, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, we were talking too that obviously it had that great impact early on, but like a lot of us experienced, there was a waning of that, right? Over the months.
Yeah, a little bit of a drop off. Yeah, and it wasn't too much, but it was definitely noticeable, So I'd say it kind of went back to some of your core families that kind of hung around, so to speak. But I know we picked up some new families from that, believe it or not, which was cool. And there definitely was a drop off, and we know that there's the ebb and flows, and that kind of, you're never going to get away from that. Yeah.
Sure. Now, Now, you started meeting in person again as a church, but
Hmm.
even as a student ministry fairly early on, it sounds like, in
We
the
did.
pandemic compared to some others. What did attendance look like? What did like the in-person part look like for students at that point?
Yeah, I mean, you can tell people were, a little tentative, stepping in slowly, for obvious reasons. But that's where we changed our format, and we said, okay, because we totally changed our sanctuary to make it more even, conducive to an online viewing experience, and so that actually worked out in great favor for our youth ministry. Um, and so, we didn't have a kind of a background that was, just for lack of better words, maybe cheesy or dated. You know what I mean? Like things were, it just made the online experience just really good for everyone. And so we brought middle school and high school into the sanctuary, and we just kind of did what we would do in like other big kind of youth events, so they both came in. We had them both come in together. We had a time where small group leaders, like the first 15 minutes, small group leaders were able to just connect with their kids, because we weren't able to really connect, right? So we said we need to take advantage of this time to really connect with our kids again, and create those relationship experiences. So the first 10, 15 minutes of every Sunday night was that in the sanctuary. And then from there, we'd move to worship. We were able to really put together a meaningful worship experience for our kids, for our students, of course, student-led worship team. And then from there, we moved to a message, just classic, right? Games worship message, and then we go and break out into our small groups. And from there, we'd break out into small groups. Middle schoolers would go with their small group leaders, and high schoolers would go with their high school leaders. And like I said, we've been hanging around that 30, 40. And even then, like it was maybe a little less. I think that first time was maybe like 18, I think, if I remember the number right.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was like 8. I think I can remember the number right. And so whether good or bad, I remember the number. And it was like in that zone. And it was just not too many weeks after that, it just started to pick up. And like I said, it's been good ever since.
Yeah, and you've had like I think even now a lot of that attendance is around that same number, that 30s, 40s number. But
Mhm.
you were talking about how you're seeing new students each week too, so there's a little bit of a changing,
Yeah.
and just I guess the overall look. It's like it's not all the faces you used to know. Some of them are home watching online,
Yeah.
which I do want to get back to the online thing. But just tell me
Sure.
about some of the new students, and um, and I guess you're missing some of the regulars, at least in
We
person.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just this weird, like I can't put my finger on it. Me and the leaders, the leadership team, we just can't put our finger on it totally. I think you have an idea, but yeah, it's almost like our youth group has taken on this new face. There's a lot of new faces, you know what I mean? And through this, which is great, right? There's excitement about that. And then there's like, but some of the, you know, a regular, so to speak, right? Those core students, they're just hanging out on the fringes a little bit. And we're still able to, our small group leaders are connecting, and we're reaching out, of course. And we've done some things, to just try stay connected with them and let them know we're here and we love them. But yeah, as far as in person, it's just taken on this almost a new identity in a way. And like I said, a little bit sad, a little bit exciting, all at the same time, that mix of emotions there.
Mm-hmm. And you were telling me that you got the new family retention plan from Ministry Boost, this bundle that's basic. Our goal when
Yes.
we created it was, can we give people 80% of a retention plan, to help people go from, oh, I attended once to coming back to getting connected and all that. That was the goal. I still think even at 80%, I don't know how much time, I'd be curious how much time you think you had to put into it. And I think you had an assistant put time
I
into it
did.
to actually implement it, because I say it's 80%, and I think that's true. But
Yeah.
in my opinion, it would still take another 20 hours, maybe, if not more, maybe more than that, to implement it. But you've been able to retain some of these new students through that. Tell me, like, what you did with it,
Yeah.
how that's worked, any
Yeah, in
tweaks you
fact,
made.
for those who are listening, I can't. The family retention plan that Nick and his team created is fantastic. Really appreciate it. I got it. I looked it over myself, and then I gave it to my administrative assistant, and she ran with it, and she killed it. And so we implemented it in January, and I had it I think I got it in August or September. I'm sure you can look at your files, but not that you would. But anyway, we got it somewhere in
Mm-hmm.
there, and And I just said, we've got to make a plan to put this in. We've got to start moving toward this because this is huge. We had a follow-up ministry, but not that intentional, not that clear. You know what I mean? Where there was workflow, where you can create workflows and and create a true system for follow-up. So, and when you're smaller, you can get away with that. But we were getting to the place where we couldn't get away with that anymore, right? We needed, with greater capacity comes, greater complexity, and we had to kind of fix that. So, I gave it to Ashley and she did great. And we're seeing not just greater retention for sure. And so I can say that we definitely are. There's no doubt about it. Our numbers are showing that, the attendance we take, but also it's actually creating an excitement with our kids who are attending to invite their friends, because every day. So I don't know, I'll share this with you. I didn't share this when we were talking. So what Ashley created through kind of some of the ideas you put there is she created this envelope. And it might be, again, I didn't read all of it, so she did. So it might, but she created this welcome kind of card, and in it, it's like, we're so glad you're here, and it's a handwritten note. She gets leaders to write handwritten notes every so many weeks, and then we have a sticker in there. We have an edge sticker in there. We put a little like, hey, if you come back a second time, we got a nice gift for you, which I know that's your strategy for second timers. The emphasis is on second timers, right? So, which is huge. Thank you for that again, and then, of course, we have a little $10 Starbucks card. Now, I know that might be a little pricey for some, but do something, right? I don't care what it is. We would say do something for the kids that they can take away and know, like, even that first time, like, hey, if we give something on the front end, we're going to give something to you on the back end, right? When you come back, right? So, and that's been great. So I kind of announced that now. We don't kind of call new first timers out, right? We don't make it awkward for them.
That's good.
But we say, hey, if you're a first timer, we have this for you. When it's over, and I kind of open it up and I show them the Starbucks card, and everyone goes, ooh, you know what I mean? But I tell our existing students, hey, this is for your friends. You invite your friends, they're going to get this. And then, and I show them, we have what we do is we have a string bag, right? A backpack. And then they get the string backpack. They get like a Life in 6 Words book from our, friends from Dare to Share, Greg Steer and those guys. We like to give those away. Or we also have the Life book. So we kind of go back and forth between that and the Life book. We also give the Gen Z book by Sunday Cool put out Carl put out that Gen Z devotional, which is great. So we kind of just go back and forth between, filling the bag with some of that stuff. We have like a little notebook with the edge sticker on it. And then we give them a T-shirt. And so when they come back that second time, we say, hey, if you're a second timer, your small group leader, give them that little coupon we have from the first timer envelope, and we'll get you your gear, and they do, and it works great. And so, like I said, it's actually created, and that was surprising to me, an excitement among our regular students to actually, because you incentivized their friends, to come. So that's worked out great. So thank you for that. And it's been fun. It's even the small group leaders like, oh, I got to give away a bag or this, and
that's cool.
It's been cool. Yeah. So the leaders are even on board.
Then if you bring a friend, you could get your friend to use their new Starbucks gift card on you. You know what I mean? Like, they take me, since it's $10. We could almost get 2 drinks. No, you know what you should do is take a picture of the stuff you give away and send it to me. I'd love to put it in the bundle, because I know I love that kind of stuff too here and what other people do. And I've had a free download forever about 16 gift ideas for new families, but more on the kids. It's about kids ministry.
Yeah, sure.
And and so many people have downloaded that, because who doesn't want those ideas? I've always meant to get a student ministry one together, and I need to, because you're doing a great job there with that, which I think is awesome. And we always say, even part of why we created the plan was because it's so much easier. And we have so much more influence over helping people come back a second time than you do coming the first time. The low-hanging fruit is retention. Getting them to come the first time, we got to focus on that too, but that's harder, much harder.
It is.
So that's great.
Harder.
You got a nice plan there. Cool. Well, I also want to ask about online. So again, you've been meeting in person for a long time. You've seen a lot of new students come. Some of the regulars aren't. Now, are they engaging online? I don't know. You had the kind of late night live thing. Dwindled a little bit in the views, but had a really good run there. In my opinion, I heard, especially if that's during that March, April, May of pandemic.
It was
in 2020.
It was.
Everybody I talked to saw declines in May. If not before then.
Yeah. Sure.
So whatever you were doing. Now, what are you doing online now? And has that changed in the fall, since the fall, or what are you doing online with students?
Yeah.
Is there anything there?
So think almost like big church. in a way, like, so the same kind of big church experience, or our main service experience that our church has, we're using all the same stuff for our youth. So it's almost the same experience. The only difference is, because that first 10, 15 minutes is where we let our small group leaders really connect with our kids, right? Their kids, I should say. It's kind of like, it's pretty much almost dead space on our YouTube. We have YouTube and Facebook that we stream to. That's just kind of like a countdown thing that says going to be, at 6:10 we go live, just kind of on there. That's some things we can do better with. We could have some, preview videos to have for them to watch, stuff for promotion, stuff for like, highlight reel kind of stuff. We haven't got there yet. But then at 6:10 it goes live, and they get to the place where we open up and we welcome and we say hi to our in-house kids, and we say hi to our online, kids and their families. And that's been doing okay. Like, we definitely don't see the numbers like you did at the late night live.
Sure.
You definitely have numbers. Like, I think we're like around 10, 10 viewing.
I was going to say 10 would be probably pretty good, though.
I think
if you're
like
in person 30, 40, to get another 10 online is pretty good.
Yeah. So we're kind of living in that area. And of course, the nice thing is, though, because they live after, we stream, it lives on Facebook and YouTube. We do get a decent number of legitimate views afterwards, which is good, because you'll see feedback from that. I'll hear, we hear feedback. Hey, I missed it Sunday night, but I got to watch it, because it stays, obviously it lives there and is posted. So either way, like I said, that ministry, it's nice that we've been able to really use those platforms for ministry. And even like, I know on our Instagram account and Facebook account, I've been doing this daily video devotional that's been doing pretty well also. We're doing, for years we did this text devotional that kind of went out, and I had a blog for our youth, and we created an everyday devotional. We did that for quite a while, and then we would send a text to say, "Hey, devotional's posted." We post a link, and kids every morning we send it out like 7 a.m., 6:50 a.m., and they can click on it before school. We had a lot of good feedback with that, and I said, I don't know if that's is translating so well now, and of course, you also have the digital, I want to say it right, your digital church strategy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That you've created. We're trying to, we've been actually looking over that as well, believe it or not, and
nice.
Trying to implement some of that, but kind of more like doing more ministry online, obviously, than promotion. We've been moving in that direction for probably almost a year, and trying to just take little steps there. So we've created this kind of video devotional that I do twice a week that we've been doing consistently, and we've heard some really good feedback from students, parents, other people, other actually just church attenders who are like, hey, I really like just adults who just happen to click on it that are in your church and go, hey man, that devotional really spoke to me. Well, that's great. Of course that's great too. But so yeah, just as much as we can to provide, content out there for people to be encouraged, discipled, and for our students to kind of continue in their walk with Jesus.
Now, one other thing that you did that you felt like was successful, I think you described it as one of the first times it felt like youth ministry again.
Oh yeah,
was the fall rally, and you're doing a spring rally here too.
Yep.
And you had pretty good participation about that. So tell us like what that was, how it went, some of the precautions you took to make it work in the midst of COVID.
Yeah, so some years ago, we had a fall retreat, and we started to outgrow the fall retreat. We did it with other churches, kind of a denominational thing. It was about 45 minutes to an hour away, where we'd go to this host site, this camp, and I realized that as me and the leaders would look, we would notice that we would have quite a bit in average in regular attenders coming to our Sunday nights, right, and other events. But when we would do fall retreat, we would have this really big drop off, and that was because of scheduling, right? So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we're asking kids and their families who have other activities and other commitments to go away for a weekend, which has its tremendous positives, which is a good thing for those who can, right? We want to do that. But it's just a really big drop off, and we were like, what if we did and just tried it like a fall rally, like a 2-day, at the time it was a Friday night, Saturday event. And that gives kids, they can still go to their game Friday night and still show up all day Saturday and still experience, right, and still, encounter Jesus, right? Instead of pulling only 30 kids away for a weekend, what if we got 100 to more than that of our kids and their friends, because we can make it outreach and discipleship at the same time, at this local, at our church. And we tried it the first year, and we wound up with like over 150 students show up who were able to come in and out. We're a little bit logistics. You had to work on that, right? Kids coming in and out, open door. You need to have workers kind of on top of things, but it worked out great. And we were able to have where we only had 30 kids kind of encounter Jesus for a weekend. We had over 150 kids encounter Jesus for a weekend. And we were like, whoa, I don't know if we want to go back. We wound up like kind of doing it every 2 years. So when COVID hit, we said, you know what? We can do this fall rally event. We've done it before. We just have to make sure we're meeting regulations. We did have a student number where we could only take so much, and because if we took more, then we'd fall outside the regulations of safety. So for us, the max number was 100 students we can take in our sanctuary. So we did it. We ran with it. We provided, of course, we have pump stations, everywhere, for the hand sanitizer, indoors. So for all the indoor stuff, we wound up with, I think, almost 100 kids at that for that fall rally that we did this November, which was, like I said, it was like a shot in the arm. It felt so good. It felt like, man, we're doing youth ministry again. So the kids were excited. It was so cool. So anyway, we did that, and then we had for 3 to 4 hours of just kind of like outside hang time, fun time. We had like the blow up game stuff. I think we had like I don't know, whatever big knock me down, the big kind of blow up ball, whatever, they had that stuff. We had, of course, we had like 2 9 squares set up. We had a Gaga pit set up. We had like Chick-fil-A boxed, catered. We had another guy called Cheese Louise Truck who came and did like grilled cheese.
Louise.
It was
nice.
Cheese Louise. It's awesome. Yeah. We had him come in, and then we had like the pretzel factory. Two of our leaders helped work with the pretzel factory. So they convinced their boss to come and bring like their whole like little setup, and they brought that. So it was cool. So we were able to do meals safely. Kids would call pump and play, where at every station, those poor kids, though, especially at 9 Square, every time they went back into the 9 Square, they had to pump, and do the hand sanitizer. Man,
Nice.
their hands must have been shot, but we wouldn't let them in otherwise. And it wasn't like we were like being like jerks about it. They just were all into it. They didn't care. They would. We didn't have to monitor it. We weren't like policing that. You know what I mean? But they did, and we had no incidents, and we had great times, great worship times, especially the evening service, of course. And it went great. And it was like, again, I think everyone needed that. The kids needed it, of course. Me and the leaders, we needed that. I think parents needed that. Families needed that. It was just it was good to have somewhat a sense of normalcy of that kind of ministry. You know what I mean? And it was healthy. It was good.
And you got another one here as we're recording. It's next week, so we'll see how that goes.
Yes, in the middle of planning that. Yeah, we're pretty much we've made that one just very similar to the fall one. Outside stuff, we've changed a little bit of stuff. We are all this is streamed, but we are connecting with 3 other churches, and we're doing a streaming experience with 3 other churches, one in Texas and one in Virginia that we're affiliated with. And so we're just kind of where the almost think of it like satellite church experience. So all the worship is live in-house at those locations, and then the speaker is going to be streamed. And so we'll have 3 different speakers from 3 different locations for the 3 different worship experiences for Saturday from 1 o'clock to 9 p.m. On the 10th. And we're hoping it's just as successful and meaningful for the kids. I think it will be. So we're praying about it. And God's going to show up like He always does.
I recently had Amber Baker on the podcast, but we had recorded in the fall. And I know one of the things she was saying about her church that was working well was just events, especially if they can do them outdoors. They're smaller than they ever used to be, right? Because of the pandemic and who will come out,
sure.
blah, blah. But that was okay. Like multiple shots of that were giving people a chance to, to attend for the first time. We're kind of experiencing that right now in our church. I've talked about this probably almost every episode. So if you listen to more than one, you probably know where we are. But it's not like we have a lot of people attending in person. We're in the 30-some% range, 35, 40.
Sure.
It started 20. Right. It started 20. Mm-hmm. And but I tell you what, one thing that's been interesting, at least the last 4 to 6 weeks, is we're seeing some of the regulars back every week for the first time. So people are deciding, I'm going to make. We have an anniversary. We call it anniversary because it used to be a birthday when we were a younger church plant. Like year 8, 9. Once we hit 10, I think it became anniversary. And so a lot of people came back then. A lot of people came back a week or two later when we added kids ministry at one of the other services. I imagine we'll see a lot of people for the first time at Easter. So those, those are all just weekend services, just a little bit different. But they're all opportunities, right, for people to say, okay, now I'm ready. Maybe I got the vaccine, maybe whatever. And
Sure.
so in the student world and kids world and whatever, some of these events like that can be just great opportunities for people to say, yep, I think it'd be a good time, for us to attend again. So cool.
Yeah.
Well,
we totally see that.
as we wrap up, tell people about your Youth Ministry Soul Keeper podcast, as well as like how people could connect with you or follow you on social or any of that.
Yeah. So, so the Youth Ministry Soul Keeper podcast is, of course, a podcast of the Download Youth Ministry Network. There are a bunch of great podcasts on that network. Of course, I know you know so many. I'm not going to go listing them all. I'll forget one, and I don't want to do that. But yeah, I mean, it's just so many great resources, so much good ministry information on, in those podcasts is like your own podcast, that just such a help to youth ministers and youth workers and youth leaders kind of everywhere. But mine is kind of is obviously what it says, Youth Ministry Soul Keeper. I experienced some burnout over 5 years ago that literally changed my life. It was one of those things, I call it the terrible beautiful. I wouldn't want to go through it again, but I'm so glad I did in a lot of ways. Learned what was really important, what really matters in ministry. Of course, learning that you never learn it, but learned, to be what it is to be healthier as someone who's ministering to students, families, et cetera. And so just kind of had that burden on my heart, and DYM provided a platform for that, and was grateful for them to trust me with that. So that's just hasn't been out long. I think I just put out my 16th episode just recently, and have one here ready to go up here next week as well, 17th, and have had a lot of fun doing that. But it's Youth Ministry Soul Keeper. Of course, you can find that anywhere you find podcasts. And like I said, I've had a blast doing that podcast, and just really trying to minister to youth workers who do so much ministry for others. Just really want that to be something that refreshes them, encourages them, and keeps the focus on their own souls, as they minister to so many other souls. So yeah, you can find me. It's YM, and I'm going to get these wrong. I think it's YM, _ Soul Keeper podcast. But if you go to the Soul Keeper podcast, you can find those links there. And then, of course, it's on Instagram, James Sabin 13. So that's probably the easiest way. If you're on Instagram, James Sabin 13. If you're on Facebook, if you just look up James Sabin, and the Soul Keeper thing will kind of pop up as well. That's my Soul Keeper podcast one. And then me and my wife has one of those corny kind of Facebook pages that we did like when Facebook first came out, and she's like the gatekeeper of Facebook. Nice. So people always think like, did I cheat on her or something? No, that's not why we have that. We trust each other. It's like literally, I'm hardly on Facebook, and so people message that. My wife's like, hey, someone messaged you. I'm like, thanks, honey. Like, I'm not on Facebook a lot, except for promotional. Yeah, so Instagram's really the best way. James Sabin 13 is the best way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you, if you just Google Soul Keeper podcast, obviously easy for people to find. You do monthly.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I've noticed, I was telling somebody else this recently, a lot of podcasts did not survive pandemic in terms of being updated. So like yours has, you continue to do it. In fact, you started not that long ago, but you've continued to keep it updated. The DYM podcast itself was gone for months.
For a little while.
Had to come back. Yeah, they just had to come back. And they're talking, and I know that the second one since they came back was about burnout.
Yeah,
so
it was.
That's interesting.
Yep,
but there's just been a ton of kids and student podcasts, which I get it. I mean, gosh, I missed more episodes in the pandemic, in that time than I missed probably total in the 3 years or whatever prior. I don't even know how far it is now. But I was a little surprised, though, just how many. If you scroll through like my feed, my subscriptions, it's like, oh yeah, wow, hasn't updated, which I get it. So kudos to starting that and keeping that going. That's a big deal. And it's a helpful thing. That. I think the more we can learn from each other, which is again, why I'm grateful for you coming on here and telling us about your experience at Kingdom and what it's been like with students there. So keep that up, keep that podcast going. And thanks for joining us.
Hey, Nick, I really appreciate you having me on. Thanks, man. Thanks for all you're doing.
Well, it's great to talk to James and hear about how he's led student ministry through the pandemic. And you heard, he's getting, sounds like about 50% of his pre-COVID attendance in student ministry, which I feel like numbers are all over the place with that. I talked to some student ministry people where it's close to 100%, and then lots of them are in the same place James is in, or even less. You're going to hear from Steve Cullum on the podcast here soon, and his high school ministry is like up 50% or double or something crazy like that. And so experiences are just totally different, depending on where you are, context, circumstances, things like that. So it was great to hear from him. Totally didn't expect him to mention the new family retention plan, but I'm glad he used it and it's working. If you want to check it out, go to ministryboost.org. You can get that there, download it, do the work to customize it, tweak it, apply it to your context, and make sure you're retaining more of the guests that watched or showed up in person at Easter. And again, you could implement that strategy. We designed it where you could implement it for your whole church. It could be your church-wide retention plan for guests. Or you could just implement it for students like he did, or just for children's ministry and those families, if that's the area in which you lead. So go to ministryboost.org to check that out. It is the last week to sign up for the Volunteer Boost 28-day challenge to recruit more volunteers. So that starts on Monday. You got to sign up by Sunday, April 11th, $37, and your whole staff can participate. For that, you see some great results from that. But again, that's also hard work. I'd say that's even more work in a shorter time than the new family retention plan. But these are important things. I mean, if you can get your volunteer team right, if you can retain more first-time guests, those two things would make you a more impactful, successful church in terms of reaching people who are not a part of any church. Those two things would do more for that mission, for that purpose, which I think all churches are called to, than almost anything else. You still got a lot you got to do. You got to love people. You got to care for people. You got to connect people, disciple people. Obviously, that's what it's all about. But in terms of reaching and growing and spreading the gospel, having enough volunteers and retaining those first-time guests, man, those are two things that you actually have more control of than you do a lot of other things, and they can really make the most difference in your church. So get the show notes at nickblevins.com/episode 226. Make sure you subscribe. We're going to have some great guests coming up, some more conversations about leading ministry throughout this season right now, and what are churches and leaders doing. But we also have some other guests that are going to talk about specific things like engaging with the Bible and leading volunteers and caring for ourselves. And so we've got some great conversations coming up. Make sure you don't miss any episode, and I'll catch you next time on the Family Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.